From the crossroads of the Ozarks. Forgot which program we were doing. It's PID Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and the crossroads of the Ozarks are rather breezy today. We got a storm system north of here. That there may be another one that comes through here tonight. Don't know.
A lot of stuff. You know, I found on YouTube, some of my favorite YouTube channels to watch now are the guys who live stream storm chaser coverage.
Oh.
And actually, those guys do a really good job. There's a couple that I follow that it's like, I'm going to tune into those guys instead of the local meteorologists. I mean, sorry, Ron Hurst of KY3. They do a fine job there at KY3 with alerts and stuff like this. But these storm chaser guys, these crazy, and they're getting live feeds from guys who are out in the middle of Iowa and Kansas following these tornadoes. It's really.
Here's what's really annoying for those guys, because they're putting their lives at risk.
Yeah.
There are news channels, some are national, and some are international, that will tap into those, and they will use their video.
Without credit.
Well, sometimes they give them credit, sometimes they don't. I hope that they pay them.
Sure.
Because the truth is that they're crowdsourcing their material, their news, and not having to pay for it in many cases.
Yeah. Well, Iowa's been hit with a number of tornadoes this past week, so
I think Michigan got some.
This is an American thing. Tornadoes, for some reason, the meteorological conditions here are just conducive, especially in the summer months, to these kind, especially in spring, but it's continued through June. A lot of funnel cloud activity, tornado activity across the Midwest, and we're thankful that nothing has hit us yet. We've had a couple have come within a mile of us since we moved here 9 years ago.
We had probably an F0, that a really tiny one that came through our property and took out some of our trees.
Yeah. They're not fun. They're quite terrifying to be part of. We're just thankful that, unlike hurricanes that can be hundreds of miles across and just cause massive amounts of damage, these are relatively small storms. If you're outside the U.S., you've never seen a tornado, count yourself blessed.
You know, tornadoes have been showing up in unexpected places recently. England's had a few.
Yeah, unusual.
Yeah.
Very unusual.
I've seen them in China. I don't know how often they get them there. You've got a big landmass that has two different weather systems that can come together, like in the middle of the U.S., which is why you generally see them, oddly enough, following I-44.
Yeah, seem to
If you live in Missouri, you know what I'm talking about. But they tend to go from southwest to northeast. And so it's because you've got those two weather systems, the Gulf system and the northern system, that they'll come together and they'll cause these storms that will indicate a spinning, because you've got those two that fighting in each other, and eventually you'll get a spin. The
colder, drier air mass with a very warm air mass coming up from the south. We're not in Tornado Alley. That would be a little further west of it. We're like the next block over. Tulsa, which is a couple hours west of us, southwest of us. That is right in the middle of it.
Northern Texas gets a bunch of them.
They're really up the Mississippi River Valley.
Generally, when I was a kid, we had a lot of them come through in southern Indiana. They generally missed us, but not always. When I was living in Madison, we were hit by a tornado in 1974, and that was a year that there were over 100 tornadoes that hit in 2 days, and it was a massive supercell system.
You know, and that was even before global warming.
I know.
Right? That's when they were saying it was global cooling. But you know what? This past week, the Washington Post ran an article saying that we've been cooling the planet while we're warming the planet. Literally. This was the headline at the Washington Post.
Well, that'll cause a tornado. Don't they understand?
Or maybe even a stronger one. A wormhole tornado, a wormnado.
That's it.
Yes,
that's
the wormnado.
The wormnado with sharks inside.
The point of the... Sharknado. Good
Shark
times.
wormnado.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The point of the author's piece was that we have put particulates into the air with air pollution, which has cooled the planet while we're warming the planet by putting carbon into the atmosphere. So while we're cleaning up the air by removing particulates and clearing up the smog, we're now taking away that protective blanket of smog that's kept the planet from overheating. So if we're cleaning the air, we're actually going to supercharge the warming component, which means we need to stop cows from passing gas because the methane is now the problem.
I see.
They are twisting themselves into knots trying to make this make sense.
Well, you'll love this. One of the articles that I posted at my X account this morning, formerly Twitter, my comment, I'll tell you in a minute, but the headline says, Scientists, we love scientists, identify greenhouse gases which could signal an inhabited planet.
Okay.
My question was, so greenhouse gases can be good?
That's how we'll identify. We'll know we shall know them by their smog.
Exactly. They must be inhabited. They've got greenhouse gases.
They've got methane. Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you follow the official evolution storyline, the Earth cooled and eventually turned into a gaseous atmosphere, and it was a greenhouse effect that allowed for the development of plant life and animal life and all of this kind of stuff. Had it not been for that, the primordial soup would have just sat there.
And stagnated.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
No.
Who wants stagnant primordial soup?
Primordial.
There's a fly in my soup. Oh, sorry. I guess that's the point.
So anyway, this has been kind of a silly week for news in a number of areas. Before we dive into, of course, the 800-pound, acknowledging the 800-pound gorilla in the room, just to remind you to please download our free app, which makes sure that whatever we say on this program or A View from the Bunker doesn't get us canceled from social media.
Oh, I can guarantee at some point we're going to say something either in the future or in the past.
Right, because they will sometimes, this has happened, go back into the archives and say, 3 years ago, you had a guest who said this, and so we're going to cancel it. Dr. Greg Reed got canceled. A couple of other guests have gotten canceled. I got canceled for talking about the 2020 election.
Yeah.
I
think that sometimes the reason that the algorithms or an individual go back to look at previous years is because you can complain.
Somebody complains about something.
Yeah.
They didn't like it.
All you have to do is report it. I don't like this. And because anybody can watch our videos.
Sure.
That means anybody has the right to complain. Look, if you ever want to complain about us, go right ahead. But please download our app if you want to complain. That way you can go on the conversation area and you can complain to your heart's desire.
That's right. And we'll never get canceled. PIDradio.com/app. That's right. Or gilberthouse.org/app. iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle Fire. We've also got Roku, Apple TV versions, the Fire Stick version coming.
Coming soon.
Amazon needs to approve
a theater near you.
Yep. The developers have got it out there. Amazon's just slow walking it. So anyway.
Well, the gorilla in the room. We'll get that out right away.
Yeah. This was the Thursday night debate.
Is this the Weird Al Yankovic version of it? Because that's my favorite.
There's a YouTube channel, a couple of brothers who have a YouTube channel called Schmo Yo-Ho, and they did within hours, like 12 hours of the debate, they had a musical tribute featuring Weird Al Yankovic. They must have been preparing this way in advance.
I think they had been, because this was, there are production values to this thing.
Yeah, and they immediately took the Biden-Trump debate from Thursday night, and by Friday morning, they had a musical version of it out, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
But previously, 4 years ago, Weird Al Yankovic did the first version of this song, which is why he's saying it's deja vu.
Exact. Excuse me.
And a lot of the same special effects that are in this one were in the original one.
Right.
So I so love those guys at Schmo Yo-Ho. They take pot shots at everybody.
Yep.
And it had been a while since they'd put up a new video, so I was excited.
Yeah. They did a lot during the Trump presidency, not so much since Joe Biden took over. So their politics probably lean left, but this one is a pretty balanced poking of fun at both sides. Like, why are we here again 4 years later? Hey, let's do that. Yeah. Good parody, because parody, satire.
Yeah.
Satire is the word I was looking for. Needs to, first of all, recognize basic human nature and have a good sense of humor. And these guys do, which is not something you often see among the progressives out there. Progressives, left-wingers, they just don't know how to meme.
Speaking of people who are online, one of our favorite podcasters is Jesus Enrique Rosas. And he's the body language guy. So I love that he analyzes. He's got an expertise in this. He really does analyze a lot of well-known, like trials and tribulations and starstruck videos, the starlets and this and that. But he also has a royal rogue. He does just royal news on it. So this Jesus Enrique Rosas on his Royal Rogue channel put up a poll asking for my Democrat followers. And I think most of his followers, they come from both sides of the aisle, but I think a lot of them are relatively conservative because they are monarchists.
Right.
So he said, for those who are Democrats, answer this. If not Biden, then who? And he had Michelle Obama, and down the line, I think it was Obama and
Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom, yes, and our vice president.
Kamala Harris.
Oh, see, I try to forget her. I really do. I just wiped her right out of my brain. Harris, but also the fourth one was Meghan Markle.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, she barely got anything, but Obama won. Michelle Obama won.
Yeah.
By almost, 2-1.
Yeah. And I find it hard to believe that she would want the job.
Well, she claims she doesn't.
She says she doesn't, but that may just be clever. Like in the same way Octavian said, "I don't want to be a king. I don't want to be a Caesar Augustus."
Yeah, I don't want to be.
Because he recognized the politics.
Well, there's the old, "I don't want to run for office, and if you force me to run for office, I won't really get into it. But if you elect me, I won't. Okay, I'll serve." Yeah.
But, she and Barack have a $14 million place in Martha's Vineyard. She wields more power now behind the scenes than she would if she were president.
Do.
Right.
They both do.
They've got more influence where they are right now on U.S. policy than they would if they were in the White House.
And mind you, there are those on the right side of the aisle, the conservative side of the aisle, that have just as much power as the Obamas. So for those of you who think that the Obamas are running our country, it may appear that that's what's going on for now, but the conservative machine is very big and very powerful.
Yep.
And there are events that happen that both sides of that machine, left and right, are involved.
Well, it's a uniparty in Washington,
really
D.C. The deep state is the uniparty.
It's like the onesies that the girls were wearing.
Right. One piece that snugs around and fits and snaps around your back end so that you can't even go without permission. So I think that's a really good metaphor.
Oh, gosh, that's so funny. Yeah. Unless someone is willing to come along and unsnap you, you don't get to go.
Right. Well, let's back up for a second because the discussion over who should replace Joe Biden is premised by his terrible performance on Thursday night.
It is, and it is also premised by his willingness to go. And he says, I literally tell you, this was the New York Post's their front page. Over my dead body.
Yeah.
Is what he is quoted as saying. Joe.
Yeah. Well, here's the cover of Time, the new issue of Time magazine.
Yeah.
It's a single word. It's a red, solid blood red background with a single word in white, panic, and it shows Joe Biden walking off the front cover of Time magazine. In fact, his left foot is already off the page, as though it is time for him to exit stage right.
As if he's wandering to shake hands with
or if he's wandering, yes, to stay, yes. So Biden's performance, I watched this on Thursday night because I had a sense that this was going to happen. Anyone who's been watching Joe Biden objectively, especially if you've got a loved one, a family member or friend who is going through dementia, what's been happening to Joe Biden over the past few years is obvious.
It's tragic.
Yeah. And
I mean, let's face it, he was never the most likable guy. He's a politician's politician.
Right.
And he plays whichever side works for him at the time.
Well, yeah, because he is claiming positions now that are 180 degrees opposed to things that he said in the past.
Yeah, I know.
So not unique to Joe Biden. Lots of politicians have done that.
A lot of them do.
But Thursday night's performance was historic. They will be writing about this for years. I don't think I'm exaggerating this. This was like the Kennedy Nixon debate in 1960.
Oh, it's worse.
Yes, you're right. I think it's worse because in 1960, people who listened to the debate on radio thought that Nixon won because he was better on policy and he was better spoken, better prepared. But on TV, he came across as looking sweaty and nervous because he was ill.
They'd given him cold medicine before he walked out there.
Right.
And that was part of what was going on. He was reacting to the cold medicine.
Yeah. So people who watched it thought that Nixon lost the debate because the visuals make a real important.
It was the first televised debate.
First one ever. So this is one that presidential historians write about. they'll be writing about Thursday night's debate for a different reason, because President Biden, within the first 15 minutes, made it clear that this was as good as he can do. He had spent 5 full days at Camp David doing nothing but preparing. His aides actually built a mock-up of the CNN set.
They knew the questions in advance.
He was as prepared as anyone has ever been in history for a situation like Thursday night, and that was the best that they were going to get out of Joe Biden. It was not pleasant to watch. I know that there were some partisan Republicans who were, doing a happy dance, but come on, this is elder abuse. He should never have been in this situation.
Too. He should never have been allowed to run. He should never have been pushed out there.
Exactly. And as an American, it's humiliating. Somebody posted this to X, and I empathize with this 100%. To our friends in the rest of the world, please avert your eyes. This is our own private humiliation. Please allow us to suffer in privacy.
Yeah, isn't that awful?
Yeah.
And here's the other terrible part about that. At the end, Jill Biden came out and congratulated him like he was a toddler who'd done a really good job in the school play.
Oh, Joe, you answered all the questions. You did so well.
Good job. Here's a cookie.
But even before that, and this is telling because the corporate media shared this video, Jill came out before they went to the backstage party room or whatever, and she had to help him get down the one step from the stage. She's holding his hand to come down. Now, look, it's one thing. It was like the photo that somebody took of us as I was helping you down the steps from the Temple Mount back in last year. I mean, that's one thing. No handrail. Okay, I get it. But
you're
Joe
always
Biden,
really good about that.
Well, I try to be. I mean,
you are.
Mom tried to raise me right.
She did.
But here you got the man who's ostensibly the leader of the free world, and his wife is having to help him get down one step. Now, maybe the picture isn't what it seemed to be, but people looking at it interpret it that way. Optics matter, and and this is the same media, because this was shared by Politico, which is a left-leaning news site that has for the last 3 years been telling us, don't believe your lying eyes. President Biden is in full command behind the scenes. He's as sharp as a tack. Now, the Wall Street Journal about a week and a half ago published an article saying, no, insiders are saying he's really not.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's watched him on the world stage for the past few years, we can see the decline. It is obvious, but the reaction from the press, I watched the reaction by the pundits on CNN and MSNBC after the debate to see how they reacted, and it was universal horror. It's like they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Van Jones on CNN, very left-leaning, interestingly, was formerly a research fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the group that's trying to figure out scientific ways to get possessed.
Wasn't he part of the Obama inside circle there for a while?
Yeah, and he's a CNN commentator now. Yeah. He was nearly in tears, and I think it was legitimate because they really wanted Joe Biden to just show the world that he was still in command of his faculties, and I think if he had exceeded expectations, which were already low for Mr. Biden, President Biden, that would have been a win for the Biden campaign and for Democrats. But it was clear within the first 15 minutes, he sounded raspy. He sounded thin. His voice was very thin and weak. He was confused. He stumbled. There were times when he got lost in the his train of thought. His closing statement, which had been prepared in advance, he stumbled, fumbled, got lost. This was an historically bad performance. This was probably the worst debate performance by a presidential candidate ever. And again, the Time magazine covered, New York Times running op-eds this week saying that it's time for Biden for the good of his country. This is what the headline says in the New York Times. For the good of his country, it's time for Biden to go. Yes,
but there are now claims that it is too late to remove him from the ballots, to which I ask, why are November ballots being printed with his name on them? Because he's not the official candidate yet. Neither is Trump.
No, that's true.
So why did they even have this debate?
This was the earliest debate in history, and there's some interesting theories about that. Why did the Biden campaign agree to this? And
if you're listening from another part of the world, the reason we're asking this question is because generally the actual presidential election debate between the two candidates takes place after the candidates have been declared, after the conferences meet.
Right. The party conventions, which normally take place in the summer. The Democrat convention is not been held yet. Neither has the Republicans.
No.
So these are the presumptive nominees. These are not the official nominees. And so you're right. Normally these would be held after the party conventions. But because of the primaries and the delegates that have been pledged at the primary levels,
it's assumed.
It's assumed.
But I'll tell you what, assumption, these delegates are supposed to represent the proportion voted for in their respective states. However, deals are made at those conventions.
Right.
All the time.
Right. Yeah. And probably what is going to happen with the Democrats is something at the convention to maneuver Joe Biden out of that slot. But as you say, yes, there are several states, for example, in Wisconsin, according to state law, it is too late to replace Biden on the ballot. A couple of other states, the deadline is coming up within days.
It's very expensive to print all these up, by the way.
Yeah, and Wisconsin is a swing state. That's an important state that will determine the outcome in November. So what this means for Democrats, we're not sure. But what the consensus of pundits after Thursday night on Friday was that the Democrats have to do something. But what they can do right now is not clear because there are some things that they need to consider. Kamala Harris, the vice president, reportedly furious that she's not in the conversation to replace Biden as the presidential nominee. But if anything, Kamala Harris is even less popular than Joe Biden. She, when she ran for president, was polling at about 3 or 4% in her home state of California, which she represented as a United States senator. She was trailing Biden and Bernie Sanders by a lot. And she dropped out of the race before the California primary to avoid the humiliation of being trounced in California. She has proven herself to be incompetent as the vice president. Her staff is chaotic. She has not handled the responsibilities that are thrown to her. And there's clearly, according to insider accounts, a split between Team Kamala and Team Joe. They don't like each other.
Well, Kamala Harris is a word salad spinner.
Mm-hmm.
Just get the light dressing out or whatever it is you would like to put your salad cream or whatever you want to call it. Get it ready because if she is the candidate, salad is going to be flying all over the place. She won't win.
No, and that's the thing. Democrats don't, and the never Trumper Republicans, in other words, the deep state, they don't want Donald Trump back in the White House, and they will do just about anything to make it happen.
Well, then have
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Have him be the candidate.
Well, that is an interesting possibility. Obviously, the other names you mentioned, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois. He's another one who's been tossed out there. Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan.
No, not Newsom. I'm sorry. He would California the entire
Well, and that's
nation.
the thing. And I think if he were to run, I think President Trump would just focus on, all he would need to do is just show live camera footage of the Tenderloin District in San Francisco.
Yes,
absolutely. Do you want your city to look like this?
Mm-hmm.
Or Skid Row in Los Angeles. Do you want your city to look like this? Or people pouring across the southern border, aside from San Diego?
Do you want your small town to look like this?
Exactly. Newsom, there are people who will look at him as like, wow, he's handsome. Vote for him. Because sadly, a lot of people do that.
I know.
He's probably the most electable of the bunch, except for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. If they got him at, but Big Pharma does not want Kennedy because he is a big.
I know he's that guy.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, if he had been part of that debate, and technically, if they were going to have two individuals who had not yet been declared the candidates, then Bobby Kennedy Jr. should have been up there.
He should have been. CNN.
He would have mopped the floor with both of them.
Yes, he would have. He absolutely would have. He was kept off the debate stage through collusion between the Trump campaign, the Biden campaign, and CNN. CNN said their rules said you've got to have at least 15% polling in 3 nationally accredited polls or 4 nationally accredited polls. And Kennedy came in with 3, even though he's going to meet the requirements to get on the ballot in all 50 states. They're keeping him off. neither Trump nor Biden wanted Kennedy on that stage because he's very well spoken, he's very smart, and would have won the debate more than likely. And suddenly you've got this spoiler in there, this Ross Perot level spoiler who's going to start drawing votes away from both candidates, and that's going to throw the election up for grabs. That may still happen, but that's the reason Kennedy was not there, is because neither the Republicans and the Democrats at the national level have basically rigged the game so that you cannot get a smaller party candidate into the public square. It's not like the UK even, or Israel especially, where you've got all these parties that are vying for votes here and there. Here it's Republican and Democrat. You get two flavors of the same party.
However, if you had an empty suit, a handsome, beautiful, whichever, empty suit that suddenly appeared on the world stage, as with Obama, he'd barely been elected into the Senate.
He hadn't even served a full term.
Right. So if you get someone like that, then it's possible that that person would, we don't know anything about that person, but boy, he or she really knows how to talk. They really know the way I want to think. All you have to do is say things that are generic.
Right.
People that can go either way. Exactly.
Right, yeah, Barack Obama was a master at that. He was a creation. And he has parlayed that into, well, again, a $14 million mansion in Martha's Vineyard and a lot of influence behind the scenes inside the highest levels of the Democratic Party. There's been the other name we have not mentioned, who may also be waiting in the wings.
Meghan Markle?
No.
No, that would be
the Hillary.
She was also on his list. Jesus Enrique Rosas' list. She didn't really pull out that much. I think she maybe got 12%.
No, I think her time has passed. And she may even recognize that at this point, which may be why she's still kind of bitter. But she will probably enter the conversation. This weekend is one of, I assume, many, many phone calls, text messages, emails going back and forth between Democrat strategists, because President Biden, publicly anyway, has said, as you say, over my dead body. He's not planning to drop out. He says he'll be there for that second debate in September. I don't think he will, because I don't think he'll be the nominee by September.
No, we'll say again, both Derek and I think that what's going on is elder abuse. We don't like him as a politician, but, there's no human being on earth that should be treated this badly by people who are supposed to care about him.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that even though it seems like all is lost for the American public when it comes to the polls in November, regardless of which side you support, you may feel like, I just don't really have a candidate that I like very much. The Lord is still in control. The Lord still raises up kings and he pulls them down. And yes, we don't call them a king, but for at least 4 years, every 4 years, someone goes into that office and gets to stay 4 to 8 years, and then they're gone. And they're there because the Lord allowed it. Even back when Gerald Ford, who had never been elected, got to be president.
Yeah.
So the Lord he allowed that for his purposes. And tell you what, that Ford Rockefeller administration, and a lot of things went on during that time period. Yeah,
I'm learning a lot. There's a book that was published back in 1994 that I highly recommend. It was a bestseller back then, but for some reason the information in that book never really made it into public discourse. I heard about it on a podcast I used to listen to years ago when I was doing outside sales, and bought the copy, and it was sitting in Kindle for probably, 7 or 8 years before I finally started reading it. When we were on our way back from...
You and I have a virtual stack of books that probably 100 plus books that we're trying to read.
Otherwise, we'd have to have people staging an intervention to clean out the house. You're hoarders. Yeah, we hoard digital books. But anyway, the book is called
Digital Hoarder.
The Secret War.
TV show.
Yeah, that's it. The Secret War Against the Jews by John Loftus and Mark Aarons, Aarons, which goes into great depth about how Western intelligence services like MI6, the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA, have been conspiring for decades to prevent Israel and to bring down Israel. And in a nutshell, it comes down to this. The Arabs have oil and the Jews don't in the Middle East. That's what it comes down to. But there are a lot of twists and turns and threads and machinations behind the scenes. But yes, in the 1970s, which of course we had the OPEC oil embargo, and that was toward the tail end of Nixon. Nixon had to resign because of Watergate. During all of that, Ford came in as the vice president, who had been made vice president after Spiro Agnew was forced to resign over some scandal, which nobody remembers. And then Nelson Rockefeller, who had never been elected, shows up as vice president. Nelson Rockefeller was one of the people that was blackmailed by David Ben-Gurion. Back in 1947, we need votes in the UN to create the independent state of Israel. And Rockefeller, it was well known, had been colluding with other intelligence assets to bring former, say, German scientists and elected officials into South America. And Rockefeller was basically presented with evidence that said, we will release this to the press if you don't get your friends in Latin and South America to vote our way. And he did, but in exchange for the Israelis promising never to go after the men who they'd helped get out of Germany.
We need to take a break.
Yeah, but Rockefeller, was an interesting character who might have been president someday. He wanted to be.
He wanted to be. He was kind of hoping that Gerald Ford, I think, something would happen to him.
Yeah. And then Carter came in, and then Carter was part of a whole nother thing. Anyway,
don't even get him started.
Read the book. It's a long, very well reasoned book, and highly recommended, because when you get done with reading it, you're like, how did Israel? God?
Yes.
The Lord?
Yes, exactly.
So, well, coming up, speaking of prophecies, the Lakota Sioux, the white bison. We got a news update on that and more straight ahead on PID Radio. Giants, gods, dragons, they're all real. We may not see them with our natural eyes, but their handiwork is evident in what's happening in the world around us, the spiritual warfare taking place.
It is so true. It's obvious in Israel, but worldwide. Historically, we've seen this happen. And we want you to get excited about the Old Testament and the New, and the giants, gods, and dragons within it, because your kids need this information. So do you.
Yes. We're living in prophetic times. Help make sense of it with our special offer through July. Our book, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, which takes a fresh look at end times prophecy. My book's Bad Moon Rising, about the spiritual forces behind Islam, and Last Clash of the Titans, the overlap between what we were told is Greek mythology and the Bible, and our DVD based on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. All of this, an $80 value for just $45 plus shipping and handling, now through July, only at our online store, gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted that you not only down our app, but you get involved in the conversation area. We love the fact that you guys ask us some questions. We're going to pick out a question in a little bit to answer at the very end of this PID episode. We also want to remind you
earlier, and now I forget what it was.
Welcome to my world.
Age fur.
Rabbit. We also want to remind you that, that we're going to be going back to Israel next year with Timothy Alberino, Doug Van Dorn, and Dr. Judd Burton.
Yes.
Who needs us?
No,
we got them.
Yeah, we'll just come along and we'll listen to them the whole
I know.
Tour. March 25th through April 3rd are the dates, and we are praying that things calm down there. We'll also talk a little bit about the situation in Israel. But if you want to find out more, and the latest information will always be at gilberthouse.org/travel. We're also contemplating another solidarity
tour. Yeah, right. That probably will take place right after the November election if we decide to go, because we don't want to get into December, because then you get into the rainy season and you can be someplace and suddenly a big river of water comes at you because there's nowhere for it to go. We want everybody to have a great time, but it is cooler in November, so it's a nice place where you can bring your little jacket or a light sweater and not be boiling during the day, as it sometimes is in May. Yep. We've been there in May before, and it's been in the 80s, and been there in May, and it's been 115.
Right. So we are looking at future tours being either earlier spring and later in the fall.
Yep. So possibility of going back. Aaron Lipkin has asked us if we'd be interested in coming back for another Solidarity tour in the fall. And yeah, we love going over there. I'd have gone right back the minute we landed back home.
Yeah. So if you're interested, if you would be interested, and this would be a small group, maybe a dozen people or so.
We'd like to get a dozen.
Right. And if there's more, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No more than 20, I don't think, because the van that we traveled in was really nice. It felt more intimate.
Yeah.
And, we took up a whole table on our own, but we could take up 2 tables in the dining hall.
Right. And having meals and getting to know everyone else on the tour is really so special. Nice. So that was, if you're interested and would be interested in joining us in November, probably somewhere around the 7th to 14th, somewhere in there, just drop us a note, info@gilberthouse.org, info@gilberthouse.org.
It is wonderful, those smaller groups, because when we've traveled, the last time we took a big group, it was 120 people. And, each bus had 40 people on it. So we get to know our bus, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, and we tried to rotate through the different buses so that we met everybody, but it's just a lot easier when you get a smaller group.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to know each other, and you make friends. We've got a Telegram group for just this tour, and there are a couple of notes that go back and forth between the 9 of us on a pretty regular basis. But we still see that with the last year's full Israel tour.
I know. They still get together for Zoom fellowships.
Right. A couple times a month. Zoom fellowships a couple of times a month.
I love it so much.
Also want to point out the page on our website, gilberthouse.org/hope for Sarah.
Yes, please. My niece, Sarah Socklaban, she's my sister Debbie Ferguson's daughter. And Debbie loves her dearly. Mm-hmm. Sarah's got a son in high school, and she brought up a stepdaughter, Brooklyn. And she also brought up, in many ways, a niece, Kendall. So she's been a great mom, and she has stage 4 cancer, which was discovered at the very last minute. She had been in for a couple of other surgeries, and while the 3rd visit to the hospital was taking place, she was told that she had stage 4 bowel cancer. Mm-hmm. Her entire story is at the Hope for Sarah page. And we would really love it if you could pray for Sarah, pray for healing, pray for her family, pray for just her strength to get through each day, because there are a lot of treatments. She's in a type of treatment that is not typical chemotherapy. It's immunotherapy. So trying to boost your immune system to go after the specific cancer cells. So this is a relatively new, which is one reason that her insurance company doesn't want to cover most of it. She's every day going into further debt. If you've been through cancer, you know what we're talking about. You know how tiring it is, how many doctor visits are involved, how difficult it is to take care of your household and your kids, but also if you've got bills on top of that are mounting up to the sky, it really can make you feel like the world is coming to an end.
Right. So if you can help at all, there are places you can do that. There, gilberthouse.org/hope for Sarah, SARAH. That would be the place to go. If you're on Facebook and you follow either one of us, we've got the link to that page pinned at the top of our Facebook feeds. And
I know many of you have already helped out. And
yes.
So thank you very, very much.
Right.
She's already told us about that. Also, if you would like to purchase some of her, she makes door wreaths and all sorts of floral things. She is very, very gifted young woman. So if you want to take a look at her Facebook page, she often lists those, or you could send her a note and just say, your Aunt Sharon said that you make door wreaths. Yeah. Could you give me some samples? She's got photos. She's probably got 100 pictures of wreaths. She makes a lot of.
And it's something that she can do. It's not physically taxing.
Right. She can sit
she can do
and work with her hands.
Right.
At the speed that she wants to. If she wants to take 2 days to make one, or she can make it in 20 minutes.
Right. And it's a productive thing. And it also gets her focusing on that and not just sitting and thinking about her situation. So,
exactly.
So you can follow her on Facebook. Sharon and I both have links on our Facebook pages, and of course the website, or the page at our website, gilberthouse.org/hope Hope for Sarah, and I need to put a little banner on the front page. I meant to do that past week and forgot. But anyway, that's why I wanted to bring that up and mention that here.
Back to the news.
Yes. Well, story that came out about 3 weeks ago at Yellowstone National Park. There was a white bison calf that was born, which, according to the religion of the Lakota Sioux, is a fulfillment of prophecy. That it portends a return of good times. And this calf was given the name. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, so if you are Lakota, please forgive me. I believe it's Wakan Gli, which means return sacred. But the sad thing is the calf has not been seen now since June 4th.
What?
Yeah, it's gone missing. They confirmed the existence of the calf because there were a number of pictures from visitors to the park back in late May, early June. So they knew it was there. They gave it a name, and then, they didn't want to mess with it because they didn't want to, interfere with its development.
When you say they, do you mean the park rangers?
Park rangers, the Lakota, visitors. There were many people who saw it, so it's confirmed that it lives. But park rangers have been looking for it now since June 4th, and they don't know whether it's still alive. It's just not been seen for more than 3 weeks.
Is it possible someone took the calf to make sure it stayed safe?
I suppose so, but if they did, they didn't do it with any authorization. They didn't do it with the knowledge of the park rangers. So,
like a human being wouldn't. Wouldn't do something like that. That kind of stuff happens all the time.
We would.
I would rather think that the calf had been taken to protect it rather than it having died.
Yeah. I
don't wish death on any animal.
From what I read earlier today, about 20% of bison calves die. Just, it's a rather high mortality rate, but that's, what happens in the wild. So sadly, this calf that was kind of eye-opening. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it's happened twice now since we started doing PID radio. I know there was another white calf that was born 10, 15 years ago. I forget when, but I know that there's been another one here within fairly recent memory. But this one...
When we first started doing PID, I do remember that.
Yeah, but anyway, this one is missing, and they don't know whether it is still alive. We hope it is, but don't know for sure.
By the way, speaking of bovines, there is a recent wastewater sampling project in a variety of cities, and San Francisco has H5N1 in its wastewater.
Oh, huh.
Now, there have been no reports of dairy farms or any cattle with H5N1 in that area. Now, those areas that do have dairy cattle, let's say you're cleaning the floor of your milking barn,
right.
Milking parlor, you're probably going to have some sort of waste that goes out into possibly a collection center that eventually makes its way into a wastewater plant. I don't know. Could go into groundwater for all I know. This isn't my area of study. But H5N1 is indeed excreted by the cattle that are infected, and probably then excreted by other animals. We know it's excreted by birds, possibly by the other mammals that are being affected. It also, H5N1 can infect dogs, cats, sea mammals of all sorts. It's been found in quite a number of zoo animals. So it's making the rounds worldwide.
Yeah.
But if it's in wastewater, then somewhere along the line, either animals have it or humans are carrying it.
Right. This is a relatively new thing. They started doing this a lot, or at least it came to our attention. Yeah. In during the pandemic, testing wastewater for virus, and that's how they were able to detect.
They're still doing that.
Yeah, COVID viral, the presence of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater.
Yeah.
So it's possible that excretions from birds that are infected are washing into the wastewater.
Possibly.
I mean, pigeons or whatever. I did see a story from about 3 weeks ago that health officials in San Francisco said there were a couple of asymptomatic chickens at a live bird market in San Francisco detected with H5N1. So, but yeah, interesting that there's enough of it that it's showing up in the wastewater.
What I find, you assume that when a bird becomes ill, that the bird will die. No, not always.
Yeah.
Not always. And I think that H5N1, we know that by that I mean scientists who are following, I personally have a lab out here. Scientists who are following this are aware of the mutations that are taking place in H5N1. It's a type of avian flu.
Mm-hmm.
The H is hemagglutinin. The N is neuraminidase.
Nebuchadnezzar.
It's Nebuchadnezzar, that's it. The H is how it gets into your cells. The N is how it gets out.
Okay.
So those are the two genes that are the most important as far as infection. I read about 3 months ago that scientists taking a look at, and in order to know this, you either did it in silico on, as in on a computer, or actually ran it in your lab, which means gain of function research. They realized there were 3 mutations away from human-to-human transmission that was at a worrying rate. Why should we be concerned about another flu? Because it's got a 50% death rate.
Oh.
There haven't been that many humans who have been infected.
That's Ebola level.
Yeah, but those humans who have been infected, it's a very, very high death rate.
Yeah, typically Ebola is strange in that it is both very infectious and also highly pathogenic, highly deadly.
Ebola is as high as 70%.
In
West Africa, it was really high.
Mm-hmm. Normally, when you get a virus that's that deadly, it doesn't spread that easily because it tends to burn out very quickly.
They look for a species where the viruses are weird. It's essentially a machine.
Little organic machine.
A thinking machine that tries to stay alive by hiding in a reservoir species.
Right. So if they just make you a little sick, that's better than if it actually kills you because then it can't transmit nearly as efficiently, or it tends to kill the thing that's keeping it alive.
Well, let's say it has you explode. That's a great way of spreading itself to all sorts of other people.
Like spores.
But eventually you run out of people.
Right. Yeah, so that's not a good long-term strategy.
No.
Well, this is something that we've been keeping an eye on, for you in particular, for a long time. Well, some of our first interviews on PID Radio, Dr. Henry Nyman about H5N1 back in 2005.
Yeah, it's swine flu. It's essentially what we're talking about,
Yeah.
H5N1. H1N1 is, now, hold on, let me just make sure let me look this up.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure that they've been calling H5N1 swine flu.
But one of the reasons we're bringing this up is that this is a warning that will continue to be sounded by global health authorities now that SARS-CoV-2 has no longer carries the same level of dread that it did in the early days back in 2020. They need something else they can scare us with into compliance. Follow our dictates. And this is why we were talking about the World Health Organization and the international health regulations, giving the World Health Organization dictatorial powers, not just over health policy, but over the flow of information. We must stop the spread of the infodemic, misinformation, malinformation, disinformation.
No, they're still calling H5N1 just bird flu.
Okay.
It's a type of avian flu, which H1N1 is as well, but H1N1, because it came back a couple of times through the 20th century. That was Spanish flu, by the way, H1N1. The numbers are, when we discover it, we give it a number. So the very first H that was discovered was a 1. But it infected swine herds. Remember in 2005? That's why they were calling H1N1 swine flu.
Right, okay.
It started down in Central America, I think.
Mexico,
at one of the Hormel plants.
Or was it Swift? What? Anyway, one of the big...
I don't think it was Hormel. I think it was the other. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that could easily take us out, but the Lord is still coming back.
Yes,
and He still has a plan for all of us. And I will say this: if you don't know Jesus, then first of all, I ask you why. Do you know anything about him? Have you ever read any of the Bible? And if you have not, then try reading the Gospel of John.
Mm-hmm.
Just read the Gospel of John. And if you have questions about that, send us a note.
Mm-hmm. There are plenty of reasons to believe, to accept that the text has been accurately preserved.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are skeptics, atheists out there who claim that the Bible has been changed multiple times over the centuries to suit the political goals of various kings and leaders and rulers, churchmen, and that just is not true. I mean, there's so many copies, so many early copies dating back to the early part of the first millennium, 2nd century, 3rd century AD, early church fathers' writings that cite Scripture, that there are plenty of texts that we can use to cross-check and cross-reference to make sure that the text has been accurately preserved.
There are a couple of really good books. The Case for Christ is one.
Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell as well.
Yes. Lee Strobel wrote Case for Christ.
Right.
So Strobel and McDowell, two great authors.
Mm-hmm.
If you have questions, you want to get the answers. But I will ask you, if you have ever studied the sciences, if you've ever looked at the organization within a cell, the organization within matter itself, look at the macro universe, everything that we can observe with our eyes, and then look at the micro, everything you need a microscope at least to look at. You'll see it's organized. All of it is organized. This implies design. There is nothing that is not designed within this world.
Mm-hmm.
Things follow patterns. We see them again and again and again, the golden mean being one of them. The idea of the Fibonacci sequence that you see in spirals in snail shells and in conch shells and in sunflowers. The seeds are arranged in a spiral. This is pattern. This implies a design and a designer. So if you start there, then who designed it?
Mm-hmm.
Who made us?
Right. There was a quote, and I just saw this on a meme poster earlier this week as you were talking. I was looking this up to confirm that this was said, Louis Pasteur, who said this: a little science distances you from God, but a lot of science brings you nearer to him.
I love that. I love that quote because it is so true.
Mm-hmm.
You can study a tiny bit of science, whatever you're told in, say, one science class in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really deep dive into it,
right,
the way I did, the way many do, then I don't know how you could not believe in a designer, at least. Evolution made no sense to me when I was in college. And yet I aced my classes because I would always write, according to the theory of evolution, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So I told them what they wanted on the tests, but they knew I was a Christian. I'd get called down in class. Well, Miss Ferguson, why do you believe this? I mean, given this evidence, hey, you've just given me a chance to witness. Thank you.
Yeah. We ran into that a lot. This would be, well, no, I'm not going to... I have to watch my tongue. Sometimes I try to get snarky, and I think that my superior logic wins the day, and that's not a way to actually be a good witness. There is a tendency on the part of us as humans to assume that if we know a little bit about a thing, that we've learned all that we need to know, and then we can base a worldview on that. As Pasteur said, if you know a little bit about science, it's very easy to then stand on that little bit of knowledge and say, well, because of science, we know that evolution occurred. Look, there were monkeys, and monkeys look, just there's a resemblance. I mean, they're bipedal. Some of them can walk upright.
Pattern.
Yeah. And so therefore, we're here, they were there, and so they must have evolved into us. And use that to distance yourself from God. But as you say, when you get into the intricacy of the cell and the interactions that make that little complex machine called a single cell function, and realize this could not have developed by accident.
It's like a city.
Yeah.
It's got a transportation system. It's got a waste plant. It's got a production
power
line.
plant.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah. So when you actually dig in, you learn more about it, you realize this did not happen by chance. This was not the tornado going through the junkyard and just automatically, somehow self-assembling a 747. Mm-hmm. It just does not happen. We see that a lot in criticisms, again, of the Bible. Well, it's been changed over the years. Really, can you show me examples? And when you start really pressing and diving down, you eventually wind up with, shut up, that's why. Because there is no there. The more you dig in, the more you know, the less you realize. You realize the less you know.
Well,
and
I think,
that the gap is filled in by God.
I think also, and we're going to end up running long, I think also that the Old Testament prophecies that have been fulfilled by Christ, we know they weren't written at the time of Christ or after because we have the Septuagint.
Right.
Which had been around for at least 200 years before Christ was born.
Yep.
And no, sorry, you don't get to play that game because we've got old versions, old copies of that, old manuscripts of that.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They're written in Greek because it was translated. Yes, yeah. Exactly. It's the Greek translation of the Hebrew text.
Right.
Sadly, a Hebrew text that we no longer have access to.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the Greek.
Yeah, we do. And we know, again, that was dates back to a couple hundred years before the birth of Jesus. So the number of texts, the date of the texts, it's not an exaggeration to say that the Bible is the best documented text of the classical era, the time of, Jesus, a couple hundred years before his birth, couple hundred years after his birth. The classical era texts that are dated to that, for example, Julius Caesar's account of his wars in Gaul. I think the oldest text we've got is from about 1000 BC, or AD, excuse me, about 1000 AD.
BC would be pretty wild.
It would be pretty wild, yeah. But the Bible, we've got fragments here and there, and especially with the Old Testament, we've got pieces from the Dead Sea Scrolls that can be dated to the 1st century BC, 1st century AD. Early church fathers' writings that date to the early 2nd century AD. There was a fragment of the Gospel of Mark that was found that dates to probably about just before the Great Jewish Revolt in the late 60s AD. So
no one asks, hey, did Julius Caesar really exist?
Right. Or Brutus, or Cato, or Cicero, or Mark Antony. No, it's taken.
No, Shakespeare invented all of them.
And of course, Shakespeare was an invention too. It was actually
we don't know exactly who.
Christopher Marlowe.
Well, there are some who say it was. Others who say it was. Who was the other guy that they're claiming?
Johnson?
Bacon.
Oh, Bacon. Francis Bacon. Yeah. So, the evidence is there for those with eyes to see. The people who deny the historical evidence and the textual evidence of the Bible, the eyewitness testimony, are ones who just don't want to see the evidence in the world of science, especially at the molecular level, which is your area of expertise, is just phenomenal. And you look at the way the Earth, and there are scholars who've done this kind of work. We're not experts in this, but we defer to them. But astronomers who point out that the location of the Earth and the size of our sun and the frequency of the light waves that it puts out are so finely tuned as to allow for human life on this Earth, and it's so rarely seen in other stars in the sky. That
everything.
Yeah.
Including the fact that we have eclipses.
Yes.
That everything is the exact right size and distance for us to have eclipses, which is part of the signs and seasons promise from the Lord. Yeah. They're not there just for light.
The unusual nature of the moon, the fact that it's so large relative to the size of the planet
and
it
that
orbits,
it doesn't, its spin
faces.
is exactly tuned to its revolution.
Right. So that it always
revolving.
faces us.
Yes. Or it's revolting is one of those.
But the tides that it creates, which keep the waters from turning stagnant, which
makes
allows
them
for
fresh
life.
all the time. Yeah, there's so much that is an indication of design. So I guess where I'm going with this, since I started this, is there is a God.
Yes.
Who loves you, who created us. And if there is a designer, and if he did create you, then other things in the Bible are true. He also died for you.
Amen. Amen. Well, yeah, there's so many other things in the news that we didn't get to this week. I had hoped we'd talk about the Supreme Court, but I mean, again, in the grand scheme of things.
Got a question? Did you find a question?
Yes, I did. We will close with that because trying to, come up with something more significant than the fact that you are here listening to us, which is because not only did God speak all things into existence, he placed us at this particular point in history for his purposes.
And here's the other thing. He works all things together for good.
Amen.
For those who are called according to his purpose, who love him. The fact that you're listening to this right now, the fact that Derek and I are sitting in this amazing barn that you helped us put together, you helped us build, all of that is part of his working it all together for good.
Yep.
So you're part of something greater.
A tapestry. We are just a couple of threads here in this tapestry that the Lord is weaving, and so are you.
But threads that are so important to God that he died for you.
Amen. Amen. Well, question that came in recently from Agnes in the app.
Oh, asking Agnes, your name means lamb.
Ah, okay. Asking about the book of Enoch. And I've had people commenting after my presentation last week, which I put up on A View from the Bunker last Sunday night. It was my presentation from His Call Ministries last weekend. Thank you again to Alec and Ginny Wade for hosting me while Sharon was here with the girls, making sure Grace and Glory recovered well from their
doing really
spaying.
well, by the way.
Yep. But I took the presentation on the book of Enoch and the Valley of the Shadow of Death, and I had people commenting, Derek, stop saying Enoch. It's not Enoch, it's Enoch. Okay, I know, it's Enoch.
It is, but most people say Enoch.
Yeah. So anyway, just like we say
it's
Baal,
like Mount Hermon,
but it's really Baal.
Most people say
Hermon.
Mount Hermon.
Yeah.
It's Mount Hermon. Hermon.
Yeah. Call it my Midwestern accent, Book of Enoch. Why is Enoch not in the Bible?
It's in the Ethiopian Bible.
It is, and there were some early church fathers who argued for the inclusion of Enoch in Scripture, and it is clear. And if you've not read Dr. Michael Heiser's Reversing Hermon, and also his Reader's Companion to the Book of Enoch, Volumes 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 deals with the Book of the Watchers, chapters 1 through 36, which expands on the Genesis 6 story of the sons of God who came down and commingled with human women. And chapters 37 to 71, the Book of Parables, which contains some prophetic stuff that are not included in the Old Testament. So no Jewish writing prior to the end of the 1st century BC, just before the birth of Jesus, includes things like, well, most prominently, the use of the title, the Son of Man, for a messianic figure who comes to earth as the instrument of God's judgment on sinful angels, wicked kings, and so forth. That's not in the Old Testament anywhere, not in any Jewish writing prior. So looking at that and looking at the Book of the Watchers in the first 36 chapters and the fact that you've got these sinful angels who corrupted the earth, that also is reflected in some of the writings in the New Testament. For example, Paul in the letter to 1 Corinthians, women should have a symbol of authority on their heads because of the angels. Mm-hmm. That's new. That's not in the Old Testament, and that doesn't appear until the Book of the Watchers, which was probably written by about 300 BC.
I think it actually says that their heads should be covered.
Yeah.
And there are some who take that to mean that they should have authority, someone who's there to protect them.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean your hair.
Yes, and I've also seen an explanation because in, let's see, who is the oath that doctors have to take? The
Hippocratic?
The Hippocratic oath. Hippocrates, who was the famous physician of Greek, the famous Greek physician, his belief was, and this was commonly held among physicians in the 1st century AD, that a woman's hair was part of her reproductive system.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
It is weird, but the idea then is that for a woman going out in public without her head covered was like going around topless. Mm-hmm. So Paul's writing may have reflected that, but the fact is that it was for the angels. Don't tempt the angels.
Right.
And that's another new thing that comes from the Book of Enoch.
Yes, but also in the Book of Enoch, you get the Book of Parables.
Right.
And the Lord himself quoted from that.
calling himself the Son of Man 78 times, right?
And that is really where you find that doctrine.
Yes.
And the doctrine of salvation by faith.
By repentance.
By
yes.
repentance.
Right. Which would have been not only new for Jewish religious authorities like the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees and Sadducees, but it was also new even for the Essenes. So this is why scholars think the book of Enoch, that section of it, chapters 37 to 71, was probably written by Essenes living in the north near the Sea of Galilee. Not at Qumran, because at Qumran they believed you had to follow their rules. It was a disagreement over whose rules to follow.
Could you put, or would you, I know you can, would you put the links to those talks?
Yes.
In the
link to the
notes?
talk about Enoch, yes.
Well,
but
to all the presentations. Can you do that? Are they all up there?
They are at Rumble, yeah. The one that I posted to A View from the Bunker last week, I cleaned up the audio because there was an electric hum that had to be removed. So the Rumble version, yeah, wasn't very musical, just annoying. But I will put that in the notes below if you want to see the talk. The reason the book of First Enoch is not, and there's a second Enoch and a third Enoch, those are written well into the Christian era.
Yeah,
and
it's First Enoch.
First Enoch, when we say the book of Enoch, typically it's referring to First Enoch. That has some internal contradictions, especially when you get chapter 71 and later.
Yeah.
Like, for example, chapter 71 reveals that Enoch himself was the Son of Man. And obviously that's not correct because Jesus was the Son of Man.
Yeah, and I think that yields into some of the weird Metatron sort of stuff. Nah.
Right. So there's some internal contradictions and some doctrinal issues with it. Some scholars believe that chapter 71 with the revelation of Enoch as the Son of Man was added by Jews in the first century when they realized, hey, the Christians are saying that Jesus was the Son of Man. We can't have that. And so that, because of that and some other internal contradictions, there are good reasons that Enoch is not in the Bible, but it is worth knowing what's in there because referenced by Jesus, referenced by Paul, referenced by Peter and Jude, John the Baptist with his teaching of a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. All of that comes from the book of First Enoch.
And now you're starting to understand why when you ask us these questions in the app, and we're so glad you do, I at least don't always wade in and actually type out an answer because I'm using my phone or my iPad. And I don't like using that little finger type to try to say all of this.
Yes.
It's easier for us to give this nice 10-minute diatribe sort of answer to you than to TLDR.
That is our tribe. We are the diatribe.
We're diets. The diet tribe.
Again, we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to this podcast. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe, click the bell for notifications, but then download our app to make sure we never get canceled. We've got a lot going on here and coming up. We're going to be working on recording more presentations here in the barn in the weeks ahead.
And I'm going to try to actually begin. I've got a podcast that's planned. I did a really quick one on our porch a few days ago, and I want to keep these pretty short.
Sure.
The one I did on the porch was maybe 2.5 minutes. And it's already 3,000 of you have watched it, so thank you very much for doing that. I'm having our good friend Jeffrey Martis, who is the king of book covers, do a logo for me, but it's going to be called The Armored Sheep. So my Armored Sheep podcast will probably start in September because Jeffrey said he couldn't get to the logo until August. He's been doing book covers for our nonfiction works. Plus, he's been doing book covers for what are planned re-releases of Winds of Evil and The Armageddon Strain. I know, I've seen some of those. Aren't they the best ever? He's showing me a picture of an armored sheep. But the idea with the armored sheep, of course, is that we are sheep. Psalm 23 is one of my core studies. Mm-hmm. I have learned so much stuff from digging into the original language and context of the understanding at the time. And the fact that in Ephesians 6, we are told that even though we're sheep, we're soldiers.
Yep.
So soldier sheep have to arm up. So armored sheep is what I want. So yeah, that will be a relatively short podcast that may come out a couple of times a week. We'll see what I'm able to work in. But as I said, the Armageddon Strain and Winds of Evil will be released in the next month or two. We've got the new covers. I'm going through and cleaning up the old manuscripts. Gosh, 2004, 2002 is when I wrote Winds of Evil.
Yeah.
2002. I wrote Armageddon Strain 2003.
Yeah. Amazing.
And the reason I want to release them exactly as they were, just want to make sure that there aren't any typos and things in them, is because there are things in there that have now happened.
Yeah. The Armageddon Strain inspired the God Conspiracy, which we released a couple of years ago because
so I need to leave
that were
it
in there.
I didn't actually date it at the time, but Winds of Evil was taking place in my head in 2005. So about the same time for the Armageddon Strain.
Yeah.
So 2004, 2005 period, about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So watch for those. This weekend, of course, tomorrow morning, we've got our Gilbert House Fellowship Bible Study. Please join us for that as we get back into the Proverbs. And tomorrow evening, Dr. Mike Spalding joins A View from the Bunker to talk about the upcoming Go Therefore conference in late July.
You want to be there. Plus, put this on your calendars. The first weekend in October.
Oh, yeah.
Idaho Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Women's Conference.
Sharon be one of the speakers. Tracy Tennant, who lives down in our area now.
Heidi Begley.
Heidi Begley.
Yeah. So it's going to be a great time. It's put together by Jeannie and Mike Kerr from Hear the Watchman. Except in this case, it's going to be Hear the Watchwomen.
I get to go to a conference and just watch.
I know. You're my plus one.
That's right. Looking forward to that. So we'll put that at our website.
And I bet Paul Begley comes as a plus one, too.
That's right. Yeah. Watch all of our, you can see all of our upcoming events at our website, gilberthouse.org, pidradio.com. I need to add those there. Anyway, but better yet, get our app and look under the calendar section of the app. All of our upcoming events with links to information and registration are at the app, gilberthouse.org/app or pidradio.com/app.
Yep. And if you think you would want to go to a solidarity tour this probably November after the election, let us know.
info@gilberthouse.org.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert. And for Grace and Glory Inside the House, bye-bye, everybody.
PID Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @PID Radio or the PID Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.